Stimulus plans, a weak dollar, promises of rapid growth in emerging markets have all contributed to a hot commodities market. But is this the investment arena for an individual investor? Well, we'll talk about that and much more with longtime commodities trader and consultant Kevin Kerr. Kevin started in the trading pits of the New York Cotton and U.S. Dollar Index back in 1989, owning his first seat by the age of 22. Currently, he is the CEO of Kerr Trading International, offices in New York and Wilton. There is so much to talk about, Kevin, including your book. Let's make a reference to that, A Maniac Commodity Trader's Guide to Making a Fortune. Good to have you back on the program.
Great to be here. Thanks.
Let's talk a little bit about where we stand. Weak dollar, this has really fed into the commodities markets, hasn't it?
It has. This is the biggest factor right now. You know, we see some commodities ratcheting up, and really it's not on demand because we're not seeing demand pick up. We have still a lot of people out of work. Factories are shut down globally. Really the big driver here is the dollar weakens. We see prices for commodities rise.
Interesting, though. We're not seeing demand here in the United States. Are you seeing demand in markets like China?
Well, we are, and that's because they're spending a ton of money on stimulus. They're also very aggressive about acquiring the resources they know they're going to need down the road. They have a real game plan in place to secure oil supply, to secure agricultural supplies and relationships with countries.
When you say that, do you mean they're stockpiling?
They are stockpiling. They're also making strategic partnerships with countries like Brazil and in Africa. They're acquiring land for the future. They realize that going forward, they have a lot more people than we do, and they also have a lot fewer resources in many areas, and they're trying to make strategic partnerships as well as stockpiling key resources like energy.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring up the point about the stimulus plan in China, here in the United States too as well, but so the growth we're seeing there is really fed by the government, not by growth within consumers, for example, a growing middle class in China.
Yeah, they've put a lot of stimulus money towards actual infrastructure projects, you know, rebuilding the infrastructure, which of course requires a lot of resources, energy, as well as base metals and other things. So they are actually spending that money. And here in the U.S., we heard that there were going to be a lot of these shovel-ready projects of the type that we definitely need here as well, new roads, new bridges, new infrastructure of all types. But we're not really seeing it spent here yet. And I think we've only spent a small amount of the stimulus that was earmarked in the U.S., so we may see that pick up here too.
Yeah, but it's interesting, though, eventually the United States is going to pull back on its stimulus plan. We heard from the Fed that they're looking at kind of starting to pull back on many of these different programs. China eventually will have to pull back a little bit. I mean, what happens then when you don't have this global stimulus going into the marketplace?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question. You know, the problem here right now, if the dollar is the Federal Reserve is no real solid dollar policy, and right now we're in a deflationary period, so it's hard to imagine inflation. But that is what will happen on the back end of this, as we have all this money circulating in the system now, and as the economy picks up, and it will, we'll see improvement as jobs start to grow again and global commerce continues hopefully to improve. You're going to see more demand for the resources globally as well. You know, hopefully it won't be requiring continued stimulus from the government, because all that's going to do is create more money in the system and create even further hyperinflation eventually.
Where's the big hot commodity play right now? Where do you see where's the next real big thing?
Yeah, we've seen gold moving a lot, and the reason we see that is it's a flight to quality out of the dollar. Is you know, China right now is encouraging their individual people to move out of dollars and into gold. That may be more political maneuvering than anything else, but we are seeing them actually recall their physical gold from London. This is a concern, you know, in the Middle East as well. They're talking about pricing oil in something other than dollars, and that's because the value of the dollar is dropping. So the gold is getting a big boost because of that. I personally like the agriculture sector. I think that going forward, as we see recovery, we're going to have a shortfall in agriculture globally, and that is going to be a sector that does well. It's also a little bit more off the radar screen than, say, gold or oil.
It is, and it also is impacted by weather so dramatically. I mean, if you're going to invest in grains, for example, you really, it's interesting too, not only the weather, but then you've got energy impacts it, and a variety, even water. I was reading about soybeans in China and the lack of water.
Absolutely, and China is the big factor here. Look, they have a lot of mouths to feed. They have a serious problems. I've written many papers on this about the agriculture system in China. You have a lot of the people that have moved out of the rural areas, younger people who don't want to do farming anymore, have moved to the cities, and now those jobs are missing, but they're not going back to agriculture. Of course, you've got you know, floods in the north of China and freezing temperatures in the south, constant weather problems, you know, just poor farming methods that, you know, they're farming on hillsides and things like this. Just widespread problems with the agriculture system there. That's why they're talking to countries like Brazil and buying land in Africa, because they know they're going to need it for the future.
Is that good news for American farmers?
Well, it is and it isn't. I mean, they depend on our imports or our exports a lot. So it's good going forward. But even with all the exports we have, it wouldn't be enough to cover the global demand that will come.
And oil. This is the big question. We're in the fall, going into the winter. We see oil, in a trading range there in the high 60s, low 70s. Where do you see it going as we get into the winter?
Yeah, we have to keep it all in perspective. Of course, it's a lot less than $147 a barrel we saw at the height there, but it's still quite high considering we have plenty of oil on hand. And let's make that clear. There's plenty of oil worldwide right now, and demand is pretty low. So we're seeing a $70 price for oil at a time when we should probably see a lot less price, and that's because of the weaker dollar. My fear is going forward, when demand is there again, prices will be much, much higher.
Not good news. Kevin Kerr, though, good to have you on the program.
Good to be here. Thanks.
And that's all for this week. We'll see you next week on 12 on the Money. I'm Rebecca Surran.